What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court. Today, I'm Sean Murphy. The episode is going to be a little bit different because when we originally recorded the episode at the beginning of the week, there were certain news stories that had not broken. In fact, I literally just tried recording this podcast and saw another Woj bomb drop. It is that time of the year, and the biggest bomb of the Pistons offseason, arguably, was dropped the other day, being that Monty Williams, the head coach that was brought in last season at the time under the highest NBA coaching contract in the history of the league, is now dismissed after one season after going 14-68 and leading the Pistons on a 28 game losing streak towards the beginning of the season. According to multiple reports, the decision was made from the ownership level. Omari Sankofa of the Detroit Free Press intel and gave detail about how Trajan Langdon was able to meet with Monty extensively over the last month. And the question they were trying to answer was, are they convinced that he can be the coach for the next 5+ years? And the answer to that ultimately was no. A lot to digest, a lot to take in with that story. But first, if you like this video, please like it down below, subscribe to the channel. Tomorrow, there's also going to be the introductory press conference for Trajan Langdon, along with Tom Gores. I will be in person attending uh, to see exactly what they say, as well as to report on it during and after. It's going to be a fascinating, couple of weeks for Pistons basketball, not just for the fact that they have a coaching hire to make. They now have a draft pick in the top 5 to make. They have a free agency period that's looming with the most cap space in the league. A lot of change is imminent. And so the question is, why do this change now? Why do it at this point? And the timing is unprecedented for the firing. You don't see a lot of times coaches getting fired the week after the finals if their season was already done for 2+ months or if they had the worst record in the league. But the reason that it happened this way is because of the Pistons president of basketball operations search. It is because Trajan Langdon came in and was, given the opportunity to evaluate and make decisions from his own standpoint. And he made the determination, along with ownership, that Monty Williams was not the best coach for the Pistons moving forward, and that would be beneficial for both sides to have a fresh start. And I personally think this makes a lot of sense. If even looking at the Monty Williams situation, the conversation was never even about him staying in the long term. The conversation was, would Monty coach another season or at least for half the season? The days were seemingly numbered for Monty in Detroit when it came out about that organizational meeting at the beginning of January, specifically in the middle of this massive losing streak, when the front office and ownership were questioning Monty about his rotations, about some of his decision making, about some of his strategy that he was implementing. And there was a lot there to question, from the fact that he had all these, these multiple all bench lineups that he would run throughout the season. He wouldn't stagger the minutes of Jaden Ivey and Cade Cunningham. Speaking of Jaden Ivey, he sat him on the bench and brought him off the bench in favor of Killian Hayes, who was, you know, Killian Hayes. And that is, just part of what led to today. But on top of that, Tom Gores is someone that, if there's a pre-existing relationship, as someone like James Edwards has pointed out, like if you have that relationship, if there is, like something there as far as, a bond, like he will give you a little bit more leeway. But in this situation, in my opinion, it says an awful lot when the Detroit Pistons are willing to spend $65 million for him to not coach the team next year. And it sounds like, not only were there not many fans from the ownership and the front office level, but it does sound like the locker room had some difficulties with him as well. And so when you get to a situation where it would do more harm than good for him to continue on the roster, Tom Gores realized the mistake that he made, understood that it was, his decision to correct, and he did so. And people could say whatever they want about the Pistons organization, about the Tom Gore's ownership reign, and they could throw whatever criticism their way that they would like. However, the one thing that you cannot say is that they are not willing to spend money. Now, whether or not they're spending their money wisely, that is an entirely different discussion. But Tom Gores is not lacking from the stance of giving his organization the resources. Now, it's going to be interesting to hear not only what their philosophy is going into this coaching search, but what their philosophy is going to be for the rest of the season or this offseason as a whole. I mean, they have a draft pick next week. We don't know if they're even going to take anybody, let alone what they're even looking for in the draft right now. We don't even know what their priorities are with their salary cap space. Are they going to try and take on more salaries like they probably should have done with Troy Weaver in exchange for draft compensation? Are they going to be more patient and try to focus more on player development? Are they going to try to bring in more veteran proven assets who can help this team compete now? Like, what's the direction? And so I'm very interested to start hearing some of those things be answered with the Trajan Langdon opening press conference. But I also imagine we're going to be hearing details and just a little bit more information on the decision to move on from Monty. Now, once Monty was brought up as a available head coach, he was almost immediately linked to the Los Angeles Lakers job from the national media and was tied as a potential candidate for that. But that was ultimately not to be, as JJ Redick has accepted reportedly the head coaching position for the Lakers. So, in my opinion, I think Monty should take the next year off, like he probably should have taken this year off and not taken the Pistons job. It was pretty apparent to me and to a lot of people that it was pretty quick that Monty seemed to have some remorse and some regret about taking the job. It was a certain level of a financial commitment that he couldn't say no to. And it's one of those things where when your heart truly isn't in something, it doesn't matter how good you are at anything. If your heart's not in it, you're not gonna get your best result. And we saw that in strides with Monty this past season, unfortunately. I do think he'll get another opportunity. I do think that he will do better at that opportunity than he did in Detroit. But in the same light, this is something that's going to sting on his legacy, on his reputation. I mean, this isn't the first time Monty got fired. I mean, in fact, this is the second offseason in a row that Monty Williams has been fired by an organization. And so it's a surreal situation. I never thought that it would get to this point. When the Pistons brought him in this time last year, he seemed like he was going to be the coach for the long haul, that he was going to be helping this team develop and take the next step. But unfortunately, that is not to be. So the question is, what next? Who could potentially be on the list of candidates? Well, from multiple reports from, one of the GOATs, again, James Edwards III, shout out to him over at The Athletic. Some names to look out for are James Borrego. He's perhaps the number one candidate on the Pistons board of interest. Another person with Pelicans connections, someone who was their head assistant in New Orleans this last year, was essentially their offensive coordinator, led them to a top 5 offense in the league. Someone who led the Charlotte Hornets under LaMelo Ball, Miles Bridges to a top 8 offense in the league into 40 plus win seasons. So I think he's someone that would make a lot of sense. He is also in the conversation in Cleveland. So that is one of the reasons why he might not be in play. But at the same light, there's also people like Sean Sweeney, who is a head assistant in Dallas, who was previously an assistant in Detroit under Dwayne Casey. There's also there is also people like Johnny Bryant from New York. There's Chris Quinn from Miami. But the point of it is the big name hunting, at least for right now, is seemingly over. Like, they have to go and find a coach that's right for this young team, that's right for this context. And quite frankly, I mean, after this last offseason, it was proven that just picking the big name is just not the way to go. So I think getting someone who can be a first-time head coach, someone who has plenty of coaching experience, has been around the game quite a lot, but can bring a young, fresh perspective, I certainly think makes a lot of sense. And listen, whoever it is, they're going to be inherently more invested, I would say, right out the jump than you would probably have gotten from a Monty Williams if he were to have been here another season. So, although it's a difficult thing for them to have to make this coaching search go underway in the midst of free agency, in the midst of draft season, in the midst of like the busiest part of the NBA calendar, at the same time, it's probably best just to rip off the Band-Aid now and not have this loom over the franchise going forward. So, it's one of those situations where Monty, unfortunately, will, be remembered, in the league for this until whatever next opportunity comes for him. And for Tom Gores, he owned up to that mistake, but is going to have to pay for it literally in the form of $65 million. So, even though Monty will not be coaching next season, he will certainly be paid as if he was. So, that's going to be a fascinating situation to watch unfold. And real quick, I wanted to talk about the JJ Redick hire for the Lakers as well. It seemed inevitable ever since Shams and Woj first reported that he was the likely and the leading candidate for the Lakers job. There was that saga with Dan Hurley as well. But in my personal opinion, I think JJ Redick has a lot of reason to believe to be a really good head coach. But in the same light, I question that if he's going to be given the leash and the opportunity to actually build a program in LA. The last two coaches they had have been 2-year coaches. Frank Vogel won a championship and was fired the next season. So they have not been very patient and graceful over the last few years. JJ Redick is a smart guy. I think he knows exactly what situation he's getting himself into. The opportunity to coach in Los Angeles, to coach LeBron James potentially, to definitively coach Anthony Davis and, whoever else will be on the roster. It's an opportunity that's very hard to pass up. And I think JJ Redick has the potential to be a really good coach. But who his staff is going to be, who's going to be alongside him is going to matter a lot because he's going to need guys who can help and garner that respect, that can teach him the things that he'll need to know about coaching in the NBA, the nuances of running a bench, of running an organization on the floor. It's something that he hasn't done before, not in any capacity. So it sounds like the Lakers are going to be pretty aggressive in putting together a serious coaching staff around him as well. What is going on? I want to welcome you from Half Court for today, Wednesday, June 19th. I'm one of your hosts, Sean Murphy, alongside the Marquette Heat, the Alaskan assassin, except he's not Alaskan, Troy Sergey. Troy, how you doing today?
Doing good, Sean. Yes, never been to Alaska. You know who is a very good NBA player who went to University of Alaska that we could have plenty of conversation some other time about is Carlos Boozer. Great NBA player, great blast from the past. Carlos Boozer. He's your Alaskan assassin. Shout out to
Yep.
Carlos Boozer, man.
Shout out Carlos Boozer is a sentence I never thought we'd say in 2024, but here we are. And I'm here for it. But Troy, it's good to see you. When I went into this weekend, I was assuming that we were going to be talking about a NBA Finals that has already concluded. But as of recording, the finals are still happening. When this podcast comes out, it's very likely that the Celtics are the NBA champions, or we could be seeing a historic comeback of epic proportions. More than likely the Celtics part, but I mean, who knows? Nonetheless, we have a lot of exciting things to talk about in the realm of basketball because this is From Half Court, where each and every week we talk all things Detroit Pistons, all things NBA basketball, whatever type of hoops we are here to talk about. If you like that, be sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel, hit that notification bell down below so you're not missing any of the latest, greatest updates and podcasts as they drop. But Troy, let's get right into it. Another week, another another sign of, not quite clarity of what's going on at the head coach position. There's reports from Mark Stein that the Pistons are more than likely going to keep Monty for this upcoming season, but nothing is set in stone. They did add a coach to their staff though this last week. This does seem like more of a Trajan Langdon hire though, as they went and got Fred Vinson from the New Orleans Pelicans. He actually was on Monty's staff at one point in New Orleans. He was actually there for 14 years. So I think for me that like the thing that like sticks out to me, Troy, is it says a lot about Trajan Langdon if he's willing to leave a team that he's been a part of for 14 years, who has a lot of talent in house that he's helped develop. And he's, widely viewed as one of the best shooting coaches in the league, which when you look at the development and where the Pistons have really struggled, it's at that ability to develop shooters. So I think when this hire was made, you and I both just agreed on this even before we started recording. Number one name you think about of, oh, this will do them wonders is Asar Thompson. If those two get in the gym together and they're able to, get together a solid plan for, his shooting regimen, I mean, that's just a huge win. Some of the guys he's worked with are Herb Jones, Trey Murphy, and that's just the start. Lonzo Ball,
Mhm.
who became a pretty solid 3-point shooter. What are your thoughts, Troy?
Yeah, there's a lot there to unravel, but certainly a Langdon hire. I think that's the obvious thing. And yes, Asar Thompson. One thing we know about Asar Thompson too is that he's a gym rat, and that ability to work
Yep.
hard in the gym, to put in the work, to listen. He's always wanting to learn more too. We think of even in the off season during summer league, who was he talking to? Jerry West, who just passed away this past week, and then we saw even a few days ago. Who did he ask a question to during the press conference? Kyrie Irving. He's very hungry to learn more, and I think Fred will certainly help him do that. But also, we know he's going to put in the work. So yes, I think he's the obvious name. But you think of the way that the league is heading, and where the league has been heading the past decade. Shooters, not just the guard, point guard, small forward position, but even the bigs too. Got to shoot the 3-point shot. So you think of this core that we have. We think of the four, who we always talk about. But even a guy like Cade Cunningham, I think even him, imagine him increasing his 3-point percentage by 3 or 4%. How much better that will be to his game. I mean, literally 3 or 4% is all you need. So I think, with the rest of the guys too, not just Asar Thompson, this will certainly do wonders. And even a Jalen Duren, I don't know if he's ready to elevate his game in year 3 to become a 3-point threat, but it's a possibility. You just never know with hires like this.
Honestly, I know with Jalen Duren, the offensive game, the potential is off the charts, but I think with him, it always just circles back to the fact that I won't care what he does on the offensive end until he turns into that consistent player on the
Sure,
defensive side of the
sure.
ball, because
Yeah,
ultimately his ceiling is going to be affected by whether or not he's a good rim
yeah,
protector. You know what I
I
mean?
agree.
Like Bam Adebayo's been able to expand his offensive game, and that's been great to watch. But we talk about Bam because of his
That's
defense.
right.
We talk about Bam because of his presence in the
He's
paint,
an
and
all-star because of
you
that
know,
defense.
Jalen. Yep, 100%. And that's just a whole other thing. That just brings back the memories of, do you remember back in like 2015 or 2016 when all of like the summer on Twitter was Andre Drummond shooting 3-point shots in the gym,
Yeah, I
and
do.
like I'm adding this to my game. I'm going to be shooting it in the season. And I think they had him stop shooting the 3 in like the middle of November,
I do remember
if I
that.
remember
That was a
correctly. Like
painful a
it
painful
was a
summer.
it was a very brief experiment.
Yeah, a painful summer because I think we all knew what was gonna happen when the season started, so
Yep. Uh-huh. We wanted to believe, but deep down, it just didn't look the greatest. Speaking of Andre Drummond, he's actually, I know the Andre Drummond Pistons reunion is something that's been talked about for a long time. I saw reports that he's actually looking to move on to a new team this off season, and it wouldn't surprise me if the Pistons were to at least make some form of offer. I mean, it makes sense, if you're looking at like having like a reliable backup center. Andre Drummond was one of the best backup bigs in the league last year with his rebounding, and just kind of where he's gotten in that. Like the question with Andre Drummond's never been the talent, and maybe with his experiences and the things that he's had to learn from, he would be a good mentor for some of the guys on the team. Have you Have you ever thought about an Andre Drummond reunion in Detroit? Is it something you would like to see, or do you think that some reunions are best kept undone?
Yeah, that's a great question, Sean. And to answer that question first, I think you have to just kind of summarize what, really think hard about what you said there. Of you know, he's a guy that we've talked a lot about. You and I personally before the podcast in 2017 and 18 of what's it going to take? What's it going to take? When's he going to, be that all star? And we're kind of expecting him to take that role of all star. And I know he made the all star roster, but not on a consistent level. And it seemed like in that era of Pistons basketball, we always came disappointed in the offseason because of Andre's previous season. Well, that's because of the role and the capacity that we wanted and expected and needed him to be. This is a whole different ballgame if you bring him back, and I think that's where you can have these conversations become a little more easier with bringing back an Andre because he strictly is your backup guy. He's somewhat a locker room guy, but still able to go out there maybe 15, 20 minutes a night and grab some defensive rebounds, maybe some offensive rebounds as well, rim protect on the defensive end, shot block. So I am one who's always pro reunion. I think even Ben Wallace's little reunion there in 2009, 2010 was fun. Chauncey Billups came back.
Even when he had to wear number 6 because freaking Rodney
Yeah,
Stuckey
right.
stole his number.
So I think I'm all in for reunions, but we need to make sure that we're playing the role. And it seems like the Pistons at least have done an okay job in the past when they have made reunions of the players understanding their role. Because even Chauncey, we brought back in 2014, 10 years after that championship he had into the 2003-2004 season. So I am all for reunions. We've seen them from other teams as well, bring back guys, but it has to be the right role, the right capacity. And I trust this organization to at least put forward, especially that makes it easier with younger guys like a Jalen Duren and even an Isaiah Stewart, to be honest with you. So,
Well, and he kind of fits that bill as well of veterans who can still
right.
produce, on a pretty consistent night to night basis. I mean, he can get you 15 to 17 minutes a night, still get you, almost 10 rebounds, get you 10 points if need be. He's still going to get you the occasional 20-20 at least once a season somehow. I mean,
Yeah, agreed.
that's just the Andre Drummond special, you know.
Yeah.
But um I think also, when you have players that would want to play in Detroit in a market that, isn't as desirable and, is in a situation where they are on the rebuild, I think that's something that, you kind of can't really take for granted either. You know what I mean? So, I know there's certainly a lot of like, free agents that I think the Pistons will be in on. And I'm not saying that I think Andre Drummond's going to be a priority for them this offseason, but I mean, if the stars were to align, if things were to, kind of, cross, I certainly think that he would provide us a lot more productive minutes than a James Wiseman or a Marvin Bagley was able to provide in that position.
And I think that's a great way of looking at it. Of who did we have in house that was giving that role that an Andre would be giving if you brought him on the team?
Mhm.
And yes, that was the name that I was thinking of was James Wiseman, and then the other one, of course, Marvin Bagley. So yeah, I do think within that role, Andre is the better candidate by far. And yeah,
Mhm.
those veteran minutes, I think, and you also know too, he's going to be giving it his all. I think he's at a stage in his career where he values the minutes, he values the every opportunity to step on the court and to have impact for whatever team he's playing for. So for me, yeah, I'm there, Sean. I really am, and I'm happy you kind of are too. So
Yeah, I think the the way Andre Drummond is treated when he comes back to Detroit, my opinion of it has kind of evolved over time because obviously hindsight's 2020. Anytime you're removed from a situation and can look back on it a little bit differently, I don't think Andre Drummond is necessarily booed because of Andre Drummond the person. I think Andre Drummond is booed because of what era of
yeah,
Pistons basketball he
I
represents.
agree.
And I don't think it was his fault that he was miscast in his role,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I understand why Pistons fans didn't love that era. Having said that, if you were to come back to Detroit and, help move forward, the progress, like imagine if Andre Drummond came back to Detroit and somehow in his, within like a couple years helped them get a playoff win, something he never got to do when he
Right,
was in his prime. Like
right,
would
and
that not be
we as fans would be here for it, wouldn't we?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that that would be a pretty cool story.
Yeah.
So, definitely something that's interesting. Speaking of something that I found pretty interesting, nothing official, but reports also have circulated about the potential, landing spot for one Troy Weaver, former Pistons general manager. I'm not sure if you saw these reports or not, Troy, but, Mr. Weaver is, potentially, going to be joining the Washington Wizards. The role is not exactly known as of yet, but, he looks like he could be joining, the front office in some capacity. I wouldn't be surprised if he was a scout or an advisor or something in that role. I personally don't know if they're going to bring him in as a general manager, especially, just kind of with his overall history in in that department, but it's not entirely surprising to me, Troy, especially when you think about the fact that he as a scout, as a talent evaluator, there is still something there, and I think the Wizards do need people who have some proven experience in that department. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, that's an organization and a franchise that needs any and every help that they can get. It's so hard to evaluate. I think right now for me, what Troy Weaver can bring to another team, just because of just how things went here. But I certainly think that his days in the league aren't over. So obviously, this isn't too surprising for me. I still think he can make an impact for where he goes. But yeah, I think that's a good starting place because I mean, there's not like a contender is going to be calling him right now. I just don't really think that that was his fate right after this job in Detroit. So the Wizards things make sense. They certainly have some pieces to play around with. Is Troy Weaver the right guy to play around with those pieces? I don't know, but if you're willing to take a gamble, I think it's a good gamble if you're a Wizards fan. So
Yeah. Part of me wonders too if the Thunder will possibly be a another potential destination as well, seeing that, he spent quite a few years with that organization. A reuniting of that role wouldn't, be too surprising potentially, but, nonetheless, like you said, basketball people are gonna have basketball jobs in the league
mhm.
as long as they can
Yeah,
show some form of value. And,
right.
again, with Troy Weaver, he might not be the best person to be behind the steering wheel, but he might be a very good co-pilot or a very good advisor or a very good scout to give input on, what potential these guys have.
Yeah,
Because, yeah, I think he fell in love with a little too many prospects in Detroit, and
sure.
it'd probably be full circle for him to end up with Marvin Bagley and potentially James Wiseman again.
I was just thinking that, especially Marvin Bagley. Yeah, but you got to pieces like Denny Avdia and too that are good to be working with. So yeah, it'll be
Uh huh.
interesting. So
Yep, the conversations with Jordan Poole
yeah,
would be
yeah,
fascinating,
that's
I'm
probably the
sure. I
biggest one.
wonder yeah, I wonder if the rate would go up or down per word by Troy. But anyway, before we're done talking Pistons, because I know that a lot of the conversations around Detroit basketball has been pretty negative over the last year or so for, for good reason, unfortunately, right? But I saw a question on Twitter the other day from a friend of the show, Cone, who was actually on the podcast last week. Shout out Cone. And he asked, what is a favorite single game performance that has gone forgotten? And this reminded me of the game 6 of the 1988 finals when Isaiah Thomas injured his ankle, was looking like he wasn't even going to be able to put any pressure on it or stay in the game. But not only does he stay in the game, Troy, he scores 25 points in a quarter.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
although Detroit did not win that game or that series, that's one of the greatest finals performances of all time, especially when you consider the circumstances. Like as crazy as the Jordan flu game is, it's a different thing when you literally can't put pressure on your leg.
right. And to score in that volume, and you think of even today with the load management, and rightfully so, there is strategy with that. And I mean, obviously, we think of even players who miss significant playoff times when maybe they're kind of in the day to day, rotation. But you have a guy who literally cannot put pressure. I mean, here's the thing about that performance, Sean. We will never see anything like that again in today's NBA.
No.
Never.
Like, the only player who could possibly do something like that is Luca. I mean, he looks like he's kind of torn up right now, but he's still putting up crazy performances in the finals.
Right,
But
right.
I mean, it's unprecedented to see a player score 25 in a quarter as a whole.
Hmm, hmm,
But to do that under those circumstances, especially against the Lakers, was borderline Herculean,
hmm, hmm.
you know?
Yeah, yeah.
So Troy, I posed this question to you, and you sent me something that was your answer before the podcast. I'm hoping that was a joke. So I will ask you here, what was your favorite Pistons single game performance?
Yeah, that's a great question. Yes, that was kind of a half kidding, half serious answer because, of course, I would probably not go on the pod and have that be my number one thing. I'm talking about that couple weeks after the Pistons traded Chauncey Billups, Rodney Stuckey exploded for 40, and that really
Yep.
turned some eyes. And that was cool as a kid to watch because the potential of that was at an all-time high of what he could be for our franchise. But of course, it didn't work out. But really, to be honest, as far as in my lifetime, what I saw. I don't want the cop out answer of Blake Griffin's 50-point game, but I'm going to go a few months after that when Blake Griffin went back to Staples Center. And there's that famous number during
Mm.
warmups. He didn't give the high five to the owner there, and he's scratching his head. Oh, you didn't give me a high five. Went for
Yeah,
45.
Steve Ballmer, he just ran right past him going
Yeah,
into the
yeah,
tunnel.
yeah. 45 points on the road on his old team, and came out with the win. And I think that's one of the most impressive things is, how many times with Pistons basketball have we seen a great performance and, the team came up short. Even your example that Pistons lost that game that Isaiah Thomas exploded for those 25 points. But this one, Blake Griffin not only had that awesome performance at Staples, but the team came out with the dub. And not only that, but that season, the Pistons made the playoffs. That's when they got swept by the Bucks, of course, in the first round, and they were
Yep.
only one game ahead of Miami. This is before the play-in tournament. Miami was the ninth seed, and then Pistons were the eighth. And that one game was the game. I mean, you could say any victory that Pistons had that season was the game that got us over. But for all intents and purposes, we'll say that game was the game that the Pistons the playoff spot because of. So for me, in recent years, for sure, that's going to be my favorite Pistons single game performance that I remember. So
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a really good one, Troy. And it's when you think of recent performances, I think, in my opinion, I think those have to be towards, if not the top as well. The thing that's crazy is, with like it's only been a short period of time, and even with all the games he's missed, I feel like there's been a lot of Cade performances as well, that have been really impressive or
yeah,
that have really stood out. And, I feel like once, a lot of those games start turning into wins,
yeah,
I think those performances will be talked about more
that's a great
as
point.
well.
Yeah, he had that. What he had 42 against the Hawks this year. Is that right, Cade?
Yeah.
And
Yep.
remember, I think
41. He had 41 in
41.
Brooklyn.
Okay.
He had 43 in Atlanta.
Okay, 43 in Atlanta. That was the game I was thinking of.
Yeah, those are within a week of each other, by the way.
Yeah, yeah, and he had another great home game against the Nets. I forgot how many he had that one, but I think it was the high 30s for that one too. So yeah, we know what he's capable of doing. But you're right. We'll always, even us Pistons buffs will always kind of forget those because they're losses and they're in a season where you don't win 20 games. But yes, when those translate to wins, those will be certainly in our memory blocks for many years to come. So.
Yeah, it's just, whenever people lose, people just view that type of thing as stat padding. I don't view it that way,
No,
especially
not at
with,
all. Yeah.
with the fact that, yeah, especially in Cade's situation, the usage was a necessity thing because of the lack of offense around him. But Troy, one thing that I found really interesting earlier today, transitioning a little bit into the finals, Brian Windhorst was on ESPN earlier today and was talking about some of the rule changes with with the new CBA. And one of the things that he discussed is that we could start seeing contracts or details of contracts as soon as the day after the finals, because the way the new CBA works, like literally the day after the finals ends, teams can start to negotiate
Right.
with their own free agents.
Right. Negotiate,
Now,
but
I don't know.
signing is still July 5th.
Yeah, signing
Oh,
signing is still once the league year starts in July, but they could still they still have that window to negotiate with with their free agents.
Yep.
And I think for small markets, in my opinion, that's a pretty big win to be able to have that window. I also think if we're being realistic, I'm pretty sure teams are already having those conversations anyway. I think one of the examples I think of in particular was when that Derrick Rose deal broke so close to when the free agency period opened a couple years ago. I think it was within like 45 seconds or
Yeah.
something like that. It
Right.
was crazy.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, Troy, we could potentially start seeing some details of things going down over the next couple of weeks. Now, for Detroit, I don't think we'll see a lot because I think, when you look at their free agents, there's really only one, in my opinion, that's a big priority, and it's Simone Fontecchio, and he's a restricted free agent. So realistically, you have to pretty much let him go on the market and see like what other teams are going to offer him. So, it's one of those things where, I don't know how much it'll affect Detroit in the interim, but over the long term, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out with free agency.
Yeah, yeah, certainly a super exciting time for us as NBA fans and as Pistons fans. And for me, over the years, it's been so fun to watch how teams go from, maybe first round teams to potentially Eastern/Western Conference Finals teams over the offseason with bringing in free agents, making smart trades, making trades on draft day. So there's a lot there that I think is really important for us NBA fans to keep an eye on, and I know we all will. Yeah, I think I'm really excited for this. Again, it's always fun to see what teams who need to be making moves make, and also teams who maybe shouldn't be making moves sometimes make. And then we can maybe have our analysis and be even proved right or proved wrong when the season starts. So it's just such a fun time, Sean, for me. And I'm looking this with the lens of, a little boy on Christmas morning, right? I mean, it's just so fun to see where players end up, where organizations go with the direction of their team, and you see that through the free agent time. So free
It's
agent,
like going to watch it's like going to watch that juicy drama down at the movie theater.
big
I got
time,
my
big time.
popcorn bucket in hand. I'm
Yeah.
ready to
Yeah. And
go.
that's why I love the NBA. And I'm sure, we can make the same argument for other leagues, but especially the NBA is, what makes it so fun is the headlines, right? The storylines that
It's truly
yeah,
year round.
it's truly year round. It's a year round game, and those storylines I think can play a really important aspect into the months of June. Even we're here in the NBA Finals, and especially to start the season even in October. So that year round, you said it, Sean. It starts with free agency. It starts with the draft. It starts with trade. Yeah, every element of the year cycle has an impact on your franchise for the regular season and the playoffs. So
I mean, the fact that now, I mean, the draft is literally within like 10 days.
yeah,
Could be within a few days of the finals finishing. And now that teams can start negotiating with their free agents a day after the finals ends. It's literally that scene in Elf where Santa shows up to the workshop, everyone's celebrating because they just got done working on Christmas, and then Santa's like, "Now it's time to work on next year's Christmas." And
yeah,
everyone goes, "Yeah!" Like it's that exact
sure,
same thing,
sure, yeah,
except instead of elves working on toys, it's maniacs in front offices looking at Excel spreadsheets
sure,
of people's overall
yeah.
statistics and analytics. It's a great time. Another guy who's going to be on the market this offseason, Clay Thompson.
Hmm.
I'm not sure if you saw any of the buzz around him,
Oh, I
Troy.
have.
Uh, he has apparently unfollowed the Golden State Warriors and all Warriors related accounts on his Instagram. He has also deleted all Warriors related posts, including pictures of him and Steph posing with rings and championship trophies. Do you think this is just kind of a play? I don't like doing the whole reading into social media game, but with Clay Thompson, he is kind of one of those guys that does seem kind of petty like that. Especially he did not seem thrilled with how the season went.
Yeah.
Do you think that the new do you think that the Golden State Warriors and Clay Thompson are heading for a breakup?
Yeah, I think they have to. I don't think you do stuff like that when there's even a remotely small chance that there's wiggle room to renegotiate your contract or whatever. I think that's too petty. You know what I mean? So yeah, and I think that this is a perfect time in the Warriors franchise, even for them, not just with Klay Thompson's career. This is a perfect time for the Warriors to kind of hit the reset button of, okay, where are we? Where do we want to be with the future? And I feel like letting a guy like Klay Thompson walk, it may hurt, but it is, I think, a necessary thing to do to regroup and to maybe build some pieces around what you have in house to become competitive again. And for Klay Thompson's perspective too, you've given your heart and soul to a franchise. Great, you've won rings with them, even better. But there comes a point in his career, and this is I think year 12 that he just finished up. So this is going to be the start of year 13, I believe.
Mhm.
He's probably not going to play another All-Star game in his career. So this is a time where he can even figure out for himself what his role is going to be moving forward in the league. And finding a team like, I know we've mentioned this name on the podcast before, Orlando Magic can be a great opportunity. We know that they were very, very close of even moving on from the first round and going to the second. So we know that he can play high impactful minutes on that team, but still letting Paolo be Paolo. So I think that's a great organization that he could potentially go to. Sky's the limit for those teams that he can help get over the hump. And I just think with
Yeah.
everything going on in their locker room and everything, just who they are as an organization, it's smart for both sides to walk away from the table. So
Yeah. I think Clay's in a position where, he's in a unique position where he can get paid pretty well from a smaller market team that is
yeah,
looking to take that next step. I think
absolutely.
Orlando is kind of the spot that everyone's kind of looking at for him. And from what it sounds like, reports suggest that, Clay wants a 3-year deal at
Mhm.
least. And, especially, I respect the competitor that Clay Thompson is. Everyone, is going to fight for every dollar they think they're worth. And especially when you win, 4 championships with an organization, you're allowed to feel the way that you feel, right? But if you are the Warriors at the same time and you're being honest about where Klay Thompson is versus what Klay Thompson was, and how do we maximize the final years of the prime of Steph Curry or just the career of Steph Curry in general, unfortunately, as crazy as it might sound, it might have to involve breaking up the Splash Brothers
Yeah.
and getting some pieces with those resources that can help and chip in different ways. And I mean, really, like they're already so financially strapped because of the decisions they've made. The Clay contract just feels like that would just lock them in a different level. And for the Warriors, I don't think they're good enough to lock into what they have.
No, no, and I think that's a great point, Sean, of what this would mean if they brought him back. And you hit on all the great points with that. And that's a team that's a situation that we've seen time and time again of organizations for nostalgia purposes. How that nostalgia purpose sometimes hurts teams in the long run. And you're right; they're not in a comfortable position. I would not want to be a Warriors fan at this point right now. I'm being serious because of some of those.
Well, I don't know if I'm feeling for Warriors fans. They have well, let's pump the brakes a little bit there. When your team had Kevin Durant and Steph Curry and Klay Thompson and Draymond Green on it within a 5-year span, I don't think we do the I wouldn't want to be them.
I
I think
meant
they're still
moving
pretty good.
forward. You didn't let me.
I know, but even then, no, but your point is very
Yeah,
valid though.
right, right.
Yeah, 100%. But Troy, I think we've done a lot of tiptoeing and dancing around it. Let's talk about this NBA Finals,
Yeah,
specifically what in the world we saw in that game 4.
right.
This is the quintessential Boston Celtics, Troy. Like if we're talking about why people have trepidations about this team, why people picked against them in the first place, myself included, is games like game 4 where they were up 3-0. They had the opportunity in Dallas to close this series to win the championship, and not only did they lose, they had the third largest loss in NBA Finals history.
Yeah,
NBA Finals history. And part of it looked like they were kind of, reserving some energy. Part of you has to wonder if they wanted to wait to win it at home. But in my opinion, Troy, when you have an opportunity to go take a title, you have to seize that opportunity
yeah,
And so I don't think we're going to see the 3-0 comeback. However, if we were, that would be the prime ingredient in that recipe.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To answer the question of what did we see, we saw a blowout, and those types of blowouts, they happen. They should not happen when you're up 3-0 and about to close in on a title, especially not knowing Luka Doncic's health concerns over this finals and even over these playoffs. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard because they seem to play pretty competitive basketball that first quarter. But yeah, that second, third, and fourth. I mean, my good. Even that fourth when they had reserve versus reserved, they didn't seem to even be going all out either. So
Well, even the
really give
first,
them.
they were outscored 34-21. Like
Yeah,
it looked
yeah,
competitive for the
right.
first few minutes, and then just for whatever reason, did they just decide, we'll wait?
I'm gonna give them the benefit of the doubt that they maybe were nervous, maybe they just needed that day off. But my goodness, they better be ready to play tonight as of a recording.
Because wholeheartedly agree. Because here's the thing. Yes, a team has never come back from down 3-0. That is a massive hill that no one's ever done that. But once you start giving a team even a little bit of wiggle room, Dallas is looking at this situation going, well, hey, no one's ever come back down from 3-0, but we've seen a team come back from down 3-1,
Exactly.
and one of the guys who did it is on our roster
Yeah.
next to Luka Doncic.
Or
If
Kyrie
our
Irving.
guys get hot, you feel pretty dang good
Yeah.
about how, about like your chances of where this series could go. And especially when, when the questions about Boston is, all right, when it's put up or shut up time, when it's time to close the deal, can you do it? This series feels a lot like just who the Celtics are. And so I think we'll learn a lot about, their resolve, their poise, seeing how they come out and, and play, in game 5. But I mean, I again, and I wholeheartedly agree. We could be looking at this series in a couple days and we could be talking about Boston as the champions. By the time this comes out, this could be totally irrelevant. However, even then, it's just one of those losses where it just feels so out of place and odd.
Yeah. Yeah. You're right, Sean. And yeah, I still think Boston will win tonight. And I think everything we're talking about, will be irrelevant on Wednesday. Or Tuesday, tomorrow even. But you're right. I would not be shocked. I would my jaw would not be dropped if Luka Doncic and Kyrie Irving stole one on Game 5, and we're talking about a Game 6 on Thursday night. Would not shock
Mhm.
me.
Yeah, and even players are saying things like before the game, like, "It's not the end of the world if we don't win game 5," but when you're starting to talk about, "Oh, we'll be okay," I get that you're confident in your team and that, that you play well on the road, but I don't wanna hear that conversation,
No,
quite frankly. If you're
no.
in that position, quite frankly, Troy, they've done the hard part. They've gotten to the finals. They're up 3 games to 1. They've done all of the heavy lifting. Now it's time to bring it home. Land the plane. Like when you have that ability to grab that trophy, we've seen so many times teams squander opportunities. And I hope I'm wrong here, but this could, I mean, if there's any team or any player that you give that benefit of the doubt of could he possibly do this? Luka Doncic is like the guy that's like, all right, this wouldn't be crazy.
Right.
Now, having said that, Dallas would need that supporting cast to continue to play the way they did in that game, especially guys like Derek Lively. But I mean, I think this kind of speaks to it pretty well. The rebound margin in this game, Troy, um, it was 52-31
Okay.
with the Mavericks getting 13 offensive rebounds. So rebounding is like the ultimate quintessential effort stat. And they got their asses kicked on the boards that night.
You gotta rebound the basketball.
Yep. Well, I mean, yeah, again, like I not to just harp down on the team that's up 3-1 in the NBA finals that's had one of the best seasons in the history of the league. that I think we're going to be talking about as a historically great basketball team, but it's one of those losses that just, again, we've seen it too many times from the Boston Celtics, and I hope we don't see it come back to haunt them, because if they do collapse, and I'm not saying it's going to happen, but if, I think we can both agree the timeline would be unfathomably chaotic.
Right.
I think people would want answers to a different level.
Yeah. 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 I just I still think we're going down a big stretch here as far as the Mavs coming back to winning
Oh,
it.
I'm not saying they will. I'm not saying they will. All I'm saying is what a squandered, like, you had the opportunity to end the season and to come out and play like that.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
I don't get I'll never understand that.
Yeah.
When you have the opportunity to win the Larry O'Brien,
Yeah.
like you're getting their best effort.
Well, here's the big question, Sean. What is Joe Mazzulla telling his team yesterday and today?
I mean, I think if anything, I think he's showing them the film. I think he's going back and they're probably cutting up a lot of the, defensive possessions, probably a lot of the rebounds they gave up, probably showing a lot of the effort and going, "Is this what got us here?" Because I mean, we know that we're a better team. I mean, we have one of the greatest, when you look at talent, especially on the defensive side of the ball, perhaps one of, if not the greatest defensive team assembled ever, based off of like the talent
Yeah.
and length that they have and the versatility that they have. Like, I think he knows, and I think they all know exactly what they need to do. I think he's, Joe Mazzulla is a very even keel, type of guy. I don't see that changing. But I mean, you definitely have to speak with a level of intensity, especially because you don't know what can happen as the series goes on. Especially the other factor of this, you already got pretty much the best basketball you're going to get out of Kristaps Porzingis this series, and that's another reason you don't want to let this series linger,
Mhm.
is because this is a different Boston team when they don't have Porzingis.
Yeah.
They just need to win one game without him,
Yeah. Yeah. Which
just
we
one.
saw them do against the Pacers. We saw them win 4 in a row against the Pacers without them. So
But with all due respect to the Pacers, this ain't the Pacers.
agreed. Agreed.
Yeah, but I mean, nonetheless, it's gonna be really fun basketball. Did you see the comments that Kyrie Irving made about playing for the Boston Celtics?
I did not.
I thought it was pretty interesting, especially because at the beginning of this series, Kyrie was talking so much about how he wanted to, like, not have any hostility. He was kind of talking about how he regrets how he handled certain things in Boston. Whereas, he said, like yesterday, they asked him about, like, being a part of Boston, and he said, "As a player, they expect you to buy into the Celtics' pride. If you don't, you're going to be outed. I'm one of the people who is on the outs," he says. And I definitely think what he's saying is fair. Like, it's not inaccurate. I would argue that he's probably in that position because of his own doing. I mean, the video of him promising the season ticket holders that he wants to come back and that he wants to have his jersey retired that's still on YouTube.
Yeah. Right. Right. Yeah. Yeah, and he's just such a different personality too, Sean. I mean, there really isn't anyone in the league that you can say, you know what, that guy is. That guy is a Kyrie Irving. You really can't say that about anyone except Kyrie Irving himself. So, yeah,
Yep, there's only one Kyrie.
certain roles, certain teams, certain franchises are not for players like that, and well, others are. And yeah, Boston is its own breed, and it produces its own breed of players, and it attracts their own breed of players. And Kyrie Irving, not one of those guys.
Yep. Now, the beauty of recording a podcast is sometimes updates can happen in the middle of recording. And according to Joe Mazzulla, he expects to see Kristaps Porzingis play tonight,
Wow,
and he's apparently not on a minutes restriction.
wow,
Now, Xavier Tillman he was asked about Porzingis' health during during press conferences, and I don't think he has quite as much media training as some of the players because he was pretty honest about how much pain Porzingis was in and how uncomfortable it was for him and
Yeah,
how he wasn't quite moving the same. So I don't know what version of Porzingis we're going to get, but I think to me, that's a pretty clear sign of I think they're really trying to push to win this game
yeah,
tonight, which I mean,
yeah.
as they should.
Yeah, right, right. Yeah, yeah. Not too surprising as far as that push, of course. But for me, Sean, I really thought Porzingis was out for the count. I mean, you're right. How they described how much that pain was for him. Not gonna lie, a little shocking that he's the one that they're gonna be putting in the lineup. Not just gonna play, but no minute restriction. That's wow. Okay.
That doesn't necessarily mean he's gonna play 30 plus minutes, but at the very least, it's nice to know that if they need him, he can be out there for a certain, period of time. Even just his presence around the rim
Yep.
is just something that changes the game. I think that's like a big part of why Dallas was able to make it more competitive when they brought it back home was because no Porzingis meant more opportunities
Right.
to drive to the rim,
Cool.
right?
Yeah.
So but I think in my opinion, I know this has been a really weird finals because a lot of the games haven't been extremely competitive. Like there's been some blowouts here and there. I still think it's been really good basketball,
Same. Same.
even though, thus far there's been a pretty clear better team. I still think it's been really close. And the fact that we're still talking about this being a competitive series at 3-1 just says a lot about these players in general.
Right.
So
And game
again, it's
three
going to
was
be
awesome. Game three was
Mhm.
really fun.
Yep, without a doubt. And
Game
I
one
mean,
too.
yeah, yeah, 100%. And like one last thing about this, kind of about this series because, again, I think it is important to acknowledge that in all likelihood, we'll be talking about the Boston Celtics as NBA champions. And I think a lot of the conversation around this Celtics team has been about Jason Tatum
Yeah.
and his ability to, take this team over the hump and to be the face, one of the faces of the league. I think a lot of pressure was put on him to be the person to, take this team over the hump. And, I think if we're being honest, I don't think he's going to be up for Finals MVP for his performance this series. I think it's a pretty clear Jalen Brown award or a Drew Holiday award, perhaps. But I don't know if Jason Tatum is in that conversation. And he was actually asked about this by Malika Andrews. And I actually really liked the answer that he gave because he was like, Kobe's a 5-time champion. He only won finals MVP twice. Really the thing that matters the most is getting the ring. And while I'm sure that's something that's important to him, and I'm sure he would love to someday hoist a finals MVP trophy, kind of similar to Steph Curry. I don't think that's something where you just inherently, discount someone's value because of the fact that they don't win the finals MVP. Like
Right.
I don't think this is still I don't think you can take away the fact that that Jason Tatum is an NBA champion and that he helped bring them there,
Right.
even if he didn't play his best hoops
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
that series.
Because Steph Curry is the perfect example of that with the three championships that they won. And he didn't get Finals MVP for any of them. And then finally, just 2 years ago against the Celtics, he did win it. So yeah,
Yep.
no, I'm with you, Sean. And even too, like the bad boy Pistons. You think of Isaiah Thomas, kind of the historical face of our franchise. He didn't win the first one himself. Joe Dumars won it, right?
He was actually it's funny you say that because Isaiah Thomas was the first name he mentioned.
Yeah, yeah,
And even Larry Bird, he didn't win every finals MVP either.
right, right. So yeah, I don't play much into that, Sean,
Yeah.
because
I
there's
think,
3 rounds before then to even get you there. So
yeah. In my opinion, I think with the Celtics being as historically great of a franchise as they are, having as many banners as they do have, when the expectations are always that high, I think there's always just kind of a level of skepticism or, an extra level of, they have extra, attention going their way in both directions, right?
yeah,
And so if they win this finals, I'm sure people will try to move the goalposts and say, well, they didn't have to play anyone this, these playoffs. But I mean, I think part of it, in the event this team does pull it off, again, as I've said before, I think part of why this run has looked so easy for the Pacers, I mean for the Celtics, is because of the fact that they're just that good.
Yeah, right, right, right. I think that's a great point that we forget when it's teams like this. Of we've questioned the Celtics at times because, but we do that because we know how good they are, how good of a roster
Yep.
they have constructed, how talented guys like Tatum and Brown can play together. We've seen so much snapshots throughout the regular season too. I mean, that's something that this team, I feel like we overlook, is we're talking about them in their playoffs. Their playoffs. Oh, that game 2 collapse against the Heat in the first round. That game 2 collapse against the Heat in the second round. Sorry, the Cavs in the second round. Where is this team's head? Where is this team head? This game 4 that we just talked about. Did we forget how talented this team was in the regular season? We have to keep that into consideration too. The champions are, of course, won in the playoffs and in the finals in June. But my goodness, the Celtics have paved the way throughout the regular season as well and made
Mhm.
them the favorite in the East. And I think all finals long, all playoffs long, that the Celtics were always the favorite going into this season. Even when the Nuggets were still playing well, the
Yeah.
Celtics still were my favorite. So
Yeah, and I think one of the guys who will really deserve his flowers once this series is over, even though I'm sure he's not going to rush to take them, is Joe Mazzulla because of the fact that there was so much skepticism thrown his way. He was thrown into the ringer in such a historic fashion. I actually saw this stat today from the Dan Lebitard show. I thought I sent this to you. I'm not quite sure. Did you know that Joe Mazzulla, as a player, was in the same draft class as Kyrie Irving?
I did not. I did not know that at all.
So, Joe Mazzulla being that young, coming into the Boston Celtics, taking over their head chair after all the turmoil that happened there with Ime Udoka, and to not only, like, keep the ship steady, but now this season with the new assistant coaching staff, take this team to different heights, be number 1 in offensive rating, top 3 in defensive rating, like, doing the things that they've done. It's remarkable.
Yeah, yeah. Kudos to him because we know how difficult of a situation that was when he got here, and we
Mhm.
know how things ended last year as far as the basketball of losing that game 7 of the Eastern Conference Finals at home. But my goodness, Joe Mazzulla has defined the odds. He's worked well with a young team as a young guy.
Yep.
Something that I not don't want to change subjects too much here, but the Lakers might have to have a conversation with. Would they have the capacity? Do they have the personnel to make a young coach work with their respective roster? Not as young as
Yep.
the Celtics, but yeah, yeah, just very remarkable, Sean.
Yeah, it's going to be fascinating, as you said, like with that coaching situation, as it very much circles closer and closer. It looks more and more likely that the coach of the Los Angeles Lakers will be JJ Redick. And, as you said, like it very much matters how a team views you, how a team, receives you. And that's very much the conversation with JJ Redick. And that conversation with Joe Mazzulla went away very early.
Mhm. Yeah,
And I think just kudos to Boston for having the faith in him and knowing what they had in house. And another guy that deserves credit too is Brad Stevens did a pretty dang good job of constructing this roster
right.
and putting this team in the position to succeed. I mean, people questioned why he deserved that job after, kind of the direction the franchise was heading for a few years, but now I think he looks like he's going to be a pretty good president for a while.
Right.
So, yeah, nonetheless, I mean, Troy, this we're in for some really good hoops. I'm sure we'll be talking more about the WNBA over the coming weeks as well,
Yeah.
about some of the games and action going down there as well. The Caitlin Clark discourse as well, which I personally think has been pretty weird.
Yeah.
With just I do kind of want to ask your opinion on that before we stop recording on
Okay.
this episode, Troy.
Yeah.
The Angel Reese foul in
Yeah.
particular.
Yeah.
I personally, and I'm not sure what you think, thought it was a basketball play, pretty clear she was not going for Caitlin Clark's head.
Right. Yeah, I'm with you too because I played basketball and I know those types of things happen. And my goodness, there's just so much that goes into this that I'm proud of Caitlin for not playing too much into, with just what kind of figure she represents in the league as an American, as a white woman, right? And there's a lot of flack that I know even is it Cartington on the Connecticut Suns is giving, and it's a very difficult time I think in our country on both ends of the spectrum there, and I think Caitlin's handling the heat very well. She
Yep.
cares about basketball, she cares about her teammates, she cares about winning, and for me as an NBA fan or as a WNBA fan, I really respect her, and I think she represents the league well, and yeah,
Yeah.
there's a lot that goes into it. But for her age, for her maturity, I think there can be a lot to be impressed with. But yes, that foul there, I don't think you have to read into that at all. And unfortunately, in this country, there's racial tensions that people even read into as well that I just don't think are there, at least
Yep.
with that specific play. With that specific play, so
Right. Right. It like the ever since the Angel Reese Caitlin Clark conversation, like rivalry has started, race has been in that conversation from day one.
yeah,
I mean, when you talk about, like a lot of the issues we have in this country are with race,
yeah,
are with, are with gender, and you're combining a lot of
right.
those
You
things
are
when it comes to the WNBA. And especially, just when you have this new influx of attention because of this player,
right,
right?
right,
And I even the foul that was pretty blatant a couple weeks ago, where she got shoved down by that Sparks player. Even I didn't think that was that bad of a foul. It was really a hip check. It was obviously a flagrant and deserved what it got in that time. But I think the way that the conversation's gone about how violent they've or how she's been assaulted, like it's just
it's
ridiculous.
pretty
And the
foolish,
thing that impressed me about Caitlyn is how she came out and said she doesn't want to be
right,
used for people's agendas, or for or for their stories, just to spin their view. Like, she wants to play basketball, she wants to compete against the best of the world,
right,
and she's not shying away from any of the contact, from any of the difficulty. And even with some of that, she still came out and got the win that night.
yep, that's right, Sean, and yeah, she's a competitor. And it's been great to watch down here for her in person. She's a different animal in person to watch, but I'm looking forward to what the league's looking like in the next 5 years and 10 years, and I think she's a big part of it, no matter what. So
Yeah, for sure. And it's gonna be fascinating to see just how that whole season winds down, not only with Caitlin Clark, but just the league as a whole.
yep,
I mean, even the Las Vegas Aces, they're 6-6 right now. They're going for the
yeah,
three-peat and aren't looking like,
and
like quite like themselves.
Asia's a good
And then
face you want for that league as well, and I feel bad sometimes she
yep,
doesn't get the credit that I think she deserves. But Asia Wilson, man, she really knows how to ball herself.
yep. Asia Wilson, Brianna Stewart, even someone like a girl that I've been a fan of for quite a few years now, my girl Sabrina Ionescu.
That's right.
She's hoping, man.
She kind
Uh,
of plays with a little bit of a Luka like style at the point guard, I think. Kind of
yeah,
that broader point guard who's able to facilitate and score at will.
I
Yeah,
see a lot of Steve Nash.
yeah. Steve Nash is another good one.
Mhm. Yeah, 100%. We'll be talking a lot more WNBA this summer, Troy. I'm excited to dive in and watch more of those hoops as the NBA season winds down.
Me too.
But that is going to be doing it for today. Troy, thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. If you like this video, be sure you like it down below. Hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any episodes in the future. And we'll catch you guys next time from Half Court. Be sure you're subscribed.